Ms. Tsongas.
Well, I thank you all for being here. This is certainly an issue that this committee has spent a good time looking at, and you're providing additional insight that's much needed. It's so hard to tell your story, but I appreciate the determination and tenacity all of you are bringing to your presence here and to your continued desire to serve your nation. I thank you for that, despite all of this. We've focused a bit on the assaults, but I'm curious about the cultural issues. And I think much of the sexual harassment that you all experience is rooted in a culture that has yet to fully embrace the diversity of the corps, the different corps that you're part of. And what I'd like to hear from each one of you is, let's just say from the day one, as you made your way into your particular academy, if you experience things that you would like the academies to take note of as they begin to think more broadly, not just about the particular crimes, but how they create an inclusive culture. So we'll start with you.
Thank you. From day one, I would definitely say that it is important to note that the upper class play a huge role in setting the command climate of each company. I was a plebe when this happened, and I came into this and I thought this was okay. And that to me was scary. And I knew deep down inside it wasn't okay, so I reported. But I had the support of my roommates at the time and my very close friends, and it was good that they had supported me in reporting. But at the same time, I didn't feel confident in relying in that chain of command of midshipmen at the time. So the culture does have an impact, especially the training and the awareness that the upper class have, especially on plebes, on underclass, in regards to sexual assault and harassment.
Regarding mine, I would say kind of similar to what Ms. Kenzior said. There's a loyalty there. My time, especially on like sports team, I know very well. I had to swim with a guy that I dealt with sexual harassment. Every single day I saw him, and I'd have to swim with him in that pool. And there was no overlay. He was a swimmer. I mean, we're both swimming in the same place. There's no way that I could get away from him, especially in that atmosphere if I wanted to keep up with my sport. So I would say that along with the fact that as soon as I opened up my case for sexual harassment, the whole team battled against me, because you don't tell on the team. You don't get the team in trouble. You don't give negative feedback about the team because you're drawing attention and you're getting people in trouble. And so eventually that's what led to me swimming by myself for 2 weeks before my big championship meet. And I have to tell you, that was probably the hardest thing I had to do, was see every single one of my teammates. No one said a thing. No one said a thing about me swimming by myself, and then they assumed I had special treatment. So, and that's all I have to say.
Thank you. Go ahead.
I think this problem begins with the fact that we have different standards than men do, and that's really, it's needed in a lot of different ways because we are physiologically different than them, but because we have lower standards physically, the men do initially think that we're lesser than them because we can't perform at the same level that they do. And so that starts in basic training from day one. And then in basic training, as we go out to the field and we're doing these operations and all these different things, now the women are segregated and we're sleeping by ourselves out to the side. So the men are participating in the shooting exercises at night, but the women are off to the side because they don't want us sleeping next to the men at the academy. So now we're further segregated. And that starts the issue there from the day one that we're at the academy. When they take the woman out to a different place, that segregation causes the issue. And like Midshipman Crane said, it starts at the lowest level. When the sophomore cadet teaches the freshman cadet about leadership, and when the graduates of the academy go out to their posts across the world from their first platoon and show leadership skills for the first time. So
Thank you. And we don't have much time, but I'd love to hear from you too.
No problem. So I also second Midshipman Crane about how the upper class sets the tone. One of my first sexual assault prevention classes as a plebe, we were told a story about how a female had said that a star football player had raped her. He was separated accordingly, and that in the end, she had actually lied about it. And they finished that story with, "Don't be that girl." That's what they tell us, told my class at least, in that sexual assault prevention class.
Thank you all. I appreciate your being here today. Thank you, and thank you to all of you here today, and for all the very challenging work you have to do in preparing leaders for the future. I think what makes what you do so unique is you are preparing people for a particular profession, which is why we bring, I think, such increased scrutiny to some of these issues. And I do believe it's only appropriate. And I, like Ranking Member Spear and others on this committee, do remain concerned about how the high number of female cadets and midshipmen who reported experiencing sexual harassment. It's a broader issue, but it was 48% of female cadets who reported that, and 29% of those females who reported experiencing gender discrimination. And for male cadets and midshipmen, the percentages were 12% for sexual assault and 5% for gender discrimination. And of all those who reported, 89% indicated that the sexual harassment or gender discrimination was committed by another Academy student. So given that, we had these remarkable women here today who were willing to tell their stories. And I felt it was important to ask them what they experienced in the culture that they felt made these numbers possible. And I thought it was really interesting what we heard from them. So one referenced the code of silence, that you inculcate a sense of loyalty among these young people. It's part of what they have to be in order to do their job well. But it comes with a downside, and that is the code of silence, so that you're seen to be disloyal if you come forward to report a crime or to report a harassment. Another one mentioned that there was a sense from the outset that women were unequal, that the physical standards for women were different, that women were segregated. So rather than so much of what you're talking about is dealing with the one-on-one issues and how to stop some of the worst behavior and give cadets or midshipmen the tools to deal with it, I'd like to ask how you're digging down deeper so that you think about the upside and downside at the same time, and you deal with it at that level rather than as it permeates the culture and makes it so much harder to deal with. I know this is not simple. These are institutions that have been primarily home to men for generations. We all are part of institutions in which change does not come easy. But I'd really like to hear how each of you are thinking as ever more women are coming into your academies, how you're thinking about getting it right from the outset, so some of these numbers just don't rise to the level. I know the survey covered a lot of different behaviors, none of which are appropriate in a professional environment. That's the bottom line. None of which are appropriate. And how to think about making sure that you don't have to deal with them as they happen. They just don't happen. So I'll start with you, General Caslin. And I haven't left you with very much time, so I'll give you each get a brief little opportunity to comment.
I'll go quick, ma'am. There's a lot there. First of all, I would just say, well, thank you very much for your question. I think we're making progress on the Code of Silence because our reporting this year nearly doubled. And that means that there's a command climate where people feel that they're trusting the system better as compared to what you heard from our victims from previous years. If you're going to change the culture, you have to change behavior. And if you change behavior, it really is through, the way we look at that is through our learning program, our educational program. And I think in the entire process that we've learned from this particular survey, that is the area that needs most of the attention. What we failed to do, and I think you've asked we've thought a lot about this, is we failed to address the root causes of sexual assault in our education programs. And this is, and we are now redoing our education program to address the root causes of sexual assault and to have better conversations about them.
Admiral Carter, I'm sorry you don't have a lot of time, but.
Well, I have some similar answers, so I won't go over the same things that General Caslin mentioned, but part of this is understanding who you are. I mean, the demographics of who is at the Naval Academy has changed over even this time of period where we heard from some of the victims. Almost 26% of the brigade of midshipmen are women today, so they're no longer isolated anymore. 3 of the last 4 brigade commanders were women. It's a meritocracy, and there's no issue with that across the brigade. women are graduating at a much higher percentage than the men. Last year's graduation rate for women was 90.5%, and the men graduated at 89%. So those speak to the actions, not the say. And I think that's part of it. Now, of course, the education is important, getting down to the, as General Castle mentioned, the root causes. We still do have some work to do, and that's where we have to get after the gender bias that shows up at the beginning of induction day.
Quickly, General Johnson.
In light of your time, ma'am, I'll be very brief, but in two ways. One, gender forums and the discussions, sometimes with women to be able to level with each other. They also, at the cadet level, have asked that they make sure it's not always just one gender, because it's not just one gender's challenge. They want to have the men in the room so we can discuss it. So those kinds of things are maturing and bearing fruit. And this on a practical level to something Councilwoman McSally mentioned early. Boxing had always been a requirement in physical education at all the academies for the men until last year. Well, Navy was ahead of us in the 90s, but now women box. It's the confidence you get, the equilibrium between the programs, between the men and women are invaluable. So there are some little things that we can do that's symbolic to say we're all equals and can all be warriors.
Thank you, and I thank you for your service, because I was fortunate to work with you, and I appreciated those years that I was able to. Thank you.